When we think about helping struggling farmers, the answer seems pretty obvious, right? Just pay them more for their crops. It's simple common sense. But what if that common sense is totally wrong? Today, we're going to dig into some really fascinating research that flips that idea on its head. It's a story about how to save a farm in post-conflict Colombia. And get this, the hero isn't a higher price, it's smarter technology.
And the stakes in this story? They're incredibly high. We're talking about regions that are trying to heal after more than 5 decades of armed conflict. In these places, cacao, the stuff that becomes chocolate, has turned into this powerful tool for peace. Farmers have already replaced 25,000 hectares of illegal crops with it. So this isn't just about farming. It's about rebuilding lives, families, and whole communities from the ground up.
So first, let's just talk about how cacao is literally a seed of peace. After the 2016 peace accord, Colombia has been working hard to bring investment into its rural areas, and cacao is right at the center of that whole effort.
And it makes perfect sense. Cacao is a fantastic crop for these areas. It's actually good for the environment. It stops soil from eroding and even pulls carbon out of the air. Most importantly, it creates a steady, legal income for families that have been cut off by conflict for generations. It helps them plug back into the world. It really seems like the perfect solution, but there's always a but, isn't there? There's a catch.
And that catch brings us to what we can call the profitability puzzle. Because even with all this promise, making a real living from cacao is just incredibly difficult. So let's break down exactly why.
Okay, so the core problem really comes down to a few major challenges. First up, these devastating fungal pests can wipe out anywhere from 40 to 80% of a harvest. I mean, just imagine losing that much of your crop. And fighting these pests, it's a huge manual job. But the real killer is that unlike a lot of other crops, cacao needs constant attention all year long. That makes finding and paying for labor an absolute nightmare for small farms working with razor-thin margins.
To really get this, let's compare it to coffee. With coffee, farmers need a ton of help during the harvest season, sure, but then things quiet down. Cacao is completely different. It's a non-stop, year-round commitment. You can't just hire a bunch of people for a few weeks. You need a consistent workforce, which is way harder and way more expensive. This constant need for labor is the central roadblock.
So after hearing all that, the solution seems obvious, right? Just pay the farmers more. Well, researchers decided to put that exact idea to the test. They wanted to unpack this common sense myth and see if higher prices really were the silver bullet everyone thought they were.
So how'd they do it? They used something called a linear programming model. Now that sounds complicated, but it's basically a super smart computer simulation. You feed it all the data about a farm, the land, the labor costs, the different crops they could grow, and the model crunches the numbers to find the most profitable way to run the farm. It's the perfect tool for asking, okay, what would it actually take to make cacao the winning choice for these farmers?
And the results were, wow. They were just staggering. For a typical farm growing a mix of things, the price of cacao would have to go up by almost 145% for it to be worth their time. Even for a smaller farm with fewer options, it still needed a 43% price hike. And when pitted just against other fruit crops, it needed a 55% bump. We're not talking about small adjustments here. These are massive, totally unrealistic price increases. So the bottom line is this. The global cocoa market is super volatile. Prices jump around all the time. Hikes of 40, 50, let alone 145%, they're just not going to happen. It's not a realistic or sustainable strategy for the long run. Chasing after higher prices is basically a dead end.
Which, of course, leads us to the million-dollar question. If just throwing more money at farmers through higher prices doesn't work, then what on earth does?
And this is where the whole story flips. The answer, it turns out, is what we can call the technology tipping point. The research shifted its focus away from factors outside the farm, like market prices, and looked at what could be changed inside the farm gate. And this is where smarter tools just changed the entire equation.
Okay, let's go back to that massive labor problem. The old-school way of fighting pests is called cultural control. It means you're out there manually checking trees and pulling off diseased pods over and over again. It takes about 24 full workdays a year for every single hectare. But the modern approach uses a biopesticide. It's a natural biological agent. You only apply it a few times a season, and it cuts that labor down to just 13 days.
That one simple switch from a manual method to a smarter technological one leads to this, a 46% reduction in labor. This number right here, this is the key. This is the aha moment that unlocks this whole puzzle.
Because here's the punchline. When you cut the biggest cost and the biggest headache, labor, by 46%, the simulation showed that cacao becomes profitable immediately. It doesn't need a 43% price hike. It doesn't need a 145% price hike. It needs a 0% price increase. It was the technology, not the price, that made the whole thing work.
So, what's the big picture here? What does this all mean for the future?
Well, it turns out that smarter farming is the path to stronger futures, and the takeaway from all this is crystal clear.
This table just lays it all out perfectly. Look at those first 3 scenarios. They all depend on jacking up the price, and what happens? Every time the answer is no, cacao is not adopted. Now look at scenarios 4 and 5, where they introduce technology. The required price increase plummets to 0, and suddenly the answer is yes. The evidence is right there, plain and simple.
So what does this mean for policymakers and aid organizations? The implications are huge. It means stop focusing only on price. Instead, invest in getting these labor-saving tools and the right training into the hands of farmers. If you're going to promote a crop like cacao as a way out of conflict, you have to also give farmers the technology that makes it actually profitable from day one.
And that leaves us with one final thought, one that goes way beyond cacao in Colombia. If we want to create real, lasting change for farmers all over the world, should we be chasing the temporary fix of higher prices? Or should we be investing our time and money in building better, more efficient, and more resilient systems from the ground up? This research seems to have a pretty clear answer.